The underground chamber reeked of fear, unwashed bodies, and the acrid smoke that drifted down from the surface where HFY's last city burned. Sarah Chun pressed her back against the cold stone wall and counted the refugees huddled in the cavern's depths. 47 beings from 17 different species, all that remained of populations that had once numbered in the billions. The crystalline singer, named Velterra, sat near the center of the group, her translucent body flickering with dim bioluminescent patterns that Sarah had learned meant deep sorrow. The elderly Zephyrian philosopher Korthvin rocked back and forth, his four arms wrapped around a data crystal containing what might be the last remnants of his people's accumulated wisdom. 3 Vorthak younglings, barely past their first molting, pressed close to their guardian, Thexmore, whose normally proud bearing had been reduced to protective desperation. Sarah's tactical display showed the Kethmoran forces converging on their position. The biomechanical scouts had found their trail 3 hours ago. Even now, the subsonic vibrations of harvester drones echoed through the rock above them. She had maybe 6 hours before the collective punched through their last defenses. "Commander Chun," whispered Dr. Ilanesh, the healer caste symbiont whose plant-like tendrils had been working tirelessly to tend the wounded. The young ones asked when their parents are coming back. Sarah closed her eyes. She'd been avoiding this conversation for days, ever since they'd fled the orbital platforms. The parents weren't coming back. Neither were the fleets, the governments, or the great powers that had once protected these worlds. The Kethmoran didn't take prisoners. They harvested minds and recycled bodies. Every adult who had stayed behind to buy time for the evacuation was gone. "They're not coming," Sarah said quietly, the words cutting through her throat like broken glass. "None of them are." The Vorthak younglings keened in harmony, a sound that made the hair on Sarah's arms stand up. Velterra's bioluminescence flared and dimmed erratically. Even Korthvin stopped his rocking. "Then we die here," said Thexmore, his translated words carrying the flat certainty of defeat. "There is nowhere left to run, and these children cannot fight biomechanical nightmares." Sarah looked around the cavern at the faces, some familiar from her anthropology studies, others utterly alien, but somehow expressing the same universal grief. She thought about Earth, 7 months gone according to her last intelligence briefing. She thought about the promise she'd made to her sister's kids before shipping out. "I'll be back for Christmas, and I'll bring you something amazing from the stars." Christmas would come and go on an Earth reduced to ash and metal. Her sister's children were likely part of the collective now, their bright laughter converted into computational resources for the hive mind's endless hunger. But these children, these 47 souls who looked at her with trust despite having every reason for despair, they were still here, still alive, still hoping. "No," Sarah said, pushing herself away from the wall. "We don't die here." Thexmore's mandibles clicked in what she'd learned was skeptical dismissal. "Your species has a saying about hope being the last thing to die, does it not? Even human optimism must have limits." Sarah pulled up her tactical display and projected it against the cavern wall. The hologram showed the Kethmoran advance, thousands of biomechanical soldiers moving in perfect coordination, harvester ships stripping resources as they advanced, the relentless expansion of a force that had consumed half the galaxy. "Look at this," she said, pointing to their current position. "See this mountain range? The Kethmoran heavy units can't navigate the narrow passes. Their aerial units are vulnerable to the electromagnetic storms that roll through every few hours." And here, she highlighted a series of caverns that connected to underground rivers, natural highways that their sensors can't map because of the mineral interference. "You're talking about hiding," said Velterra, her harmonic voice carrying undertones of resigned acceptance. "For how long? Days? Weeks? They will find us eventually." "I'm not talking about hiding," Sarah said. "I'm talking about building." She gestured, and the display zoomed out to show the entire system. Kelthara 7 isn't just a mining world. The surveys show that these mountains are honeycombed with natural caverns, most of them connected to geothermal vents. There are underground ecosystems down here that the surface dwellers never bothered to explore. Water, minerals, even some forms of indigenous plant life that could be cultivated. Dr. Ilanesh extended several tendrils toward the display, analyzing the data. The geothermal output would be sufficient for basic life support, yes. "But, Commander," You are describing a survival shelter, not a solution. Even if we could build something sustainable down here, what then? Hide for generations while the collective consumes the galaxy. Sarah changed the display again, this time showing schematics that she pulled from her personal files, blueprints she'd been working on during the long months of retreat. What if we could build more than just a shelter? What if we could build a weapon? The designs that appeared made several of the refugees step back in surprise. They showed vast underground complexes, manufacturing facilities powered by geothermal energy, and something else, training grounds, schools, nurseries. The Kethmoran Collective has a fundamental weakness, Sarah continued. They're a hive mind. They think in terms of assimilation and resource extraction. They can't conceive of a force that grows stronger through diversity instead of unity. Korthvin looked up from his data crystal for the first time in hours. Explain. Sarah highlighted sections of the blueprint. Every species here has knowledge, abilities, perspectives that the others don't. The Vorthak are master engineers. The Zephyrians understand quantum mechanics better than anyone in 3 sectors. The crystalline singers can communicate across vast distances without technological infrastructure. The symbionts can accelerate healing and growth. And there are others. Each group brings something unique. You want to build an alliance, said Thexmore, but his tone had shifted from dismissive to cautious interest. Not an alliance, Sarah said. A family. She pulled up another image, this one showing children of different species playing together in a vast underground garden, while adults work side by side in workshops and laboratories. The collective thinks in terms of conquering and converting. They've never faced a force that grows stronger through cooperation instead of domination. They've never fought an enemy that treats retreat as an opportunity to recruit and strengthen allies. Velterra's bioluminescence shifted to patterns that Sarah's translation software interpreted as deep consideration. You are proposing to hide in these mountains while the collective expands across the galaxy and somehow build a force capable of challenging them? From 47 refugees. Not 47, Sarah said. 47 now. But there are other groups out there, other survivors, other ships that escaped, other worlds that haven't been found yet. Every time the collective advances, they leave refugees in their wake. People who know their methods, their technology, their weaknesses. People who have every reason to fight. She gestured again, and the display showed potential communication networks, hidden supply lines, recruitment protocols. We build a home down here, a real home, sustainable and defensible. We take in every refugee we can find. We learn from each other, teach each other, protect each other. And we raise children who know that the galaxy is worth fighting for because they've seen what it means to build something beautiful instead of just destroying it. The cavern fell silent except for the distant rumble of the surface battle. Sarah could see the wheels turning behind alien eyes, species-specific expressions of hope and doubt and calculation. Dr. Ilanesh was the first to speak. The biological challenges would be significant. Creating living spaces suitable for 17 different species, managing dietary needs, ensuring reproductive health for multiple life cycles. But not impossible, Sarah asked. The symbiont's tendrils swayed in what Sarah had learned meant cautious optimism. Not impossible. Difficult, but not impossible. Korthvin clutched his data crystal tighter. The Zephyrian archives contain engineering specifications that could be adapted for such construction. Environmental systems, energy distribution, structural integrity for underground complexes. The quantum resonance chambers we use for long-distance communication could be modified, added Velterra. If your theory is correct about other survivor groups, we could coordinate efforts across multiple systems. Sarah felt something she hadn't experienced in months. Actual hope. Not the desperate, clinging hope of survival, but the warm, growing hope of possibility. The younglings, said Thexmore suddenly. What of them? You speak of raising children, but these 3 have seen their parents harvested. They have witnessed the destruction of everything they knew. How do you propose to heal such trauma? Sarah knelt down in front of the 3 Vorthak younglings. They were roughly equivalent to human 8-year-olds, with the slightly oversized eyes and softer carapaces that marked their juvenile status. One of them, the smallest, clutched what looked like a broken toy. What was your favorite thing about home? She asked gently. The smallest youngling looked up at her with eyes that held too much sorrow for someone so young. Through the translation system, his voice came out as a whisper. Nest Mother would sing the old songs while Nest Father built new chambers for the colony. We would help carry the small stones, and when the work was done, we would all eat together and share stories. Sarah felt her throat tighten. Would you like to do that again? Help build new chambers, but this time for everyone? Vorthak and humans and Zephyrians and everyone else. The youngling's mandibles twitched in what might have been the beginning of interest. Could we sing while we build? I think that would be perfect, Sarah said. Volterra knows songs too, don't you? The crystalline singer's bioluminescence shifted to warmer tones. I know songs from 7 worlds. I could teach them, if the younglings would like to learn. For the first time since the evacuation, Sarah saw something like a smile cross the youngest Vorthak's features. It was a small thing, but in the depths of an underground cavern while the world burned above them, small things mattered. Sarah stood and looked around the group. I can't promise this will be easy. I can't promise we'll survive. But I can promise that if we do this, if we build something down here, it won't be a hiding place. It will be a launching pad. A place where children who lost everything can grow up knowing that they're part of something worth fighting for. She paused, thinking of all the tactical manuals that had trained her to think in terms of acceptable losses and strategic withdrawals. None of them had prepared her for this moment, but somehow the words came anyway. I'll build you a home, she said, her voice carrying to every corner of the cavern. And you'll give me a family. The rumbling from above grew louder. The collective forces were getting closer. Soon they would have to move deeper into the mountain, begin the long work of carving out a life from stone and hope. But for now, in this moment, Sarah watched as 47 faces from 17 different worlds looked back at her with something that hadn't existed an hour ago. Purpose. Thexmore was the first to step forward. The Vorthak Engineering Consortium pledges its knowledge and labor to this endeavor. Korthvin followed, clutching his data crystal. The accumulated wisdom of Zephyria is yours to command. One by one, the others added their voices, not just agreement but commitment, not just survival but hope. As the vibrations from above grew stronger and they prepared to move deeper into the mountain's heart, Sarah activated her personal recorder. If they didn't survive the coming days, she wanted there to be some record of this moment. Not of humanity's last stand, but of its newest beginning. Personal log, Commander Sarah Chun, Terran Defense Forces. Date, 2387.156. Location, Kelfer's 7 Underground Complex. Beginning Operation New Dawn with 47 allied refugees from 17 species. Mission parameters, build a sustainable community capable of long-term growth and eventual offensive operations against Keth Moran collective forces. Personal note, today I learned that family isn't about sharing blood or even sharing species. It's about sharing hope. She closed the recorder and shouldered her pack. Time to start building a home worth defending and a family worth fighting for. The galaxy's last war was about to begin, and it would be fought not with the cold logic of the collective, but with the chaotic, beautiful, utterly human power of love. 3 months after the promise, Sarah Chun stood in what would have been impossible to imagine during those desperate first days in the cavern. A thriving underground city carved from living rock, humming with the sounds of construction, learning, and life. The main cavern had been expanded into a vast circular space with terraced levels that followed the natural contours of the stone. Bioluminescent gardens created by the symbionts provided both food and gentle light, while crystalline singer resonance nodes amplified the natural acoustics to carry messages throughout the complex without technological infrastructure that might be detected by collective sensors. Sarah watched from the central platform as Vorthak younglings worked alongside human refugees who had found their way to New Dawn over the past weeks. Together, they carried materials to construction sites where Zephyrian quantum engineers and human military specialists collaborated on defensive systems that neither species could have conceived alone. The growth had been faster than anyone expected. What started as 47 survivors had become nearly 300 as word spread through hidden networks that the crystalline singers had established. Ships limped in from failed battles across 3 sectors, bringing not just refugees but crucial intelligence about collective operations and occasionally captured technology that Dr. Ilanesh and her expanding medical team could reverse engineer. Commander called Thexmore from across the cavern. The Vord hack had appointed himself chief of engineering operations, and his natural talent for organization had proven invaluable. The deep bore drilling team has reached thermal layer 7. The preliminary surveys suggest we can tap enough geothermal energy to power manufacturing operations for a community of up to 2,000 individuals. Sarah nodded, but her attention was drawn to a commotion near the main entrance tunnel. A new group of refugees was arriving, the third this week. As she watched, she saw something that made her breath catch. Children, dozens of them, from species she'd never encountered before. Dr. Ilanesh was already moving toward them, her tendrils extended to assess medical needs. But it was Valterra who reached them first, her harmonic voice immediately switching to what Sarah recognized as a universal lullaby. Simple tones that seemed to calm frightened younglings regardless of species. The adult leading the group was massive, easily 9 feet tall, with the distinctive chitinous plating of the Corvin hegemony. Sarah had read about the Corvins, but never met one. Their empire had been on the far side of collective territory, one of the first to fall. The fact that any had survived this long was remarkable. "I am War Prime Dracthon," the Corvin announced as Sarah approached. His translated voice carried the formal cadence of military training. These 73 individuals represent survivors from 14 different Corvin colony worlds. We seek sanctuary and the opportunity to continue resistance operations. Sarah looked at the children huddled behind him. Not just Corvin younglings, but others as well. 14 colony worlds? How did you manage to evacuate so many? Dracthon's mandibles shifted in what she was learning to recognize as bitter pride. "We did not evacuate. We collected. For 6 months, my ship has traveled from system to system, gathering those who were overlooked or abandoned. These children, their parents died buying time for escape ships that never came, or were lost in battles that the rest of the galaxy never knew were fought." One of the human refugees, a former teacher named Maria Santos who had arrived 2 weeks ago, knelt down beside a small creature that looked like a cross between a bird and a flowering plant. "Hey there, little one. Are you hungry?" The child creature made a sound like wind chimes in a gentle breeze. Maria didn't need translation software to understand the meaning. She pulled a packet of synthesized nutrients from her kit, specially formulated by Dr. Ilanesh's team to be safe for most known biology types, and offered it with a smile. "War Prime," Sarah said, "welcome to New Dawn. We have room, food, medical care, and work for anyone willing to contribute. But I need to ask, were you followed?" "Negative. My ship's stealth systems remained functional, and I took precautions. However, I must inform you that collective expansion has accelerated. They have developed new assimilation protocols. Instead of simply harvesting populations, they are now converting captured individuals into autonomous agents who retain their original memories and personalities while serving the hive mind." Sarah felt ice form in her stomach. Living people who think they're still themselves, but actually work for the collective? Precisely. It makes infiltration nearly undetectable. They remember their families, their motivations, their fears, but their ultimate loyalty belongs to the hive mind. I have seen former allies turn on resistance cells with perfect tactical knowledge of our operations. The implications hit her immediately. Any refugee could be compromised without knowing it. Any friendly contact could be a trap. The paranoia required to defend against such infiltration would destroy exactly the kind of community trust they were trying to build. "There must be a way to detect the conversion," said Korthvan, who had been quietly listening from nearby. "The Zephyrian archives contain extensive research on consciousness and identity manipulation. If the collective is altering neural pathways while preserving surface memories, I may be able to help," added Valterra. "Crystalline Singer resonance can detect neural harmony patterns. If someone's core consciousness has been altered, the dissonance would be apparent to properly trained singers." Sarah looked around at the growing crowd of refugees and their children. The paranoia was already starting. She could see it in the way some of the established residents hung back, uncertain whether these new arrivals could be trusted. This was exactly how the collective would destroy them, not through direct assault, but by making them afraid to trust each other. We're going to need a protocol, she said finally. Something that can verify identity without making people feel like prisoners. Can you design something that feels like a welcome celebration instead of an interrogation? Dr. Ilanesh's tendrils swayed thoughtfully. A medical examination is standard for any new arrivals. If we integrate neural resonance testing and consciousness harmony assessment into the standard health screening, it would appear routine. And we make it communal, added Maria Santos, still kneeling beside the bird plant child. Like a welcoming ceremony. Everyone participates, singing, sharing stories, traditional foods from different cultures. Make it feel like a celebration of joining the community rather than a test to pass. Drakthon's massive head turned toward her. You would trust the safety of your community to singing and storytelling? No, Sarah said. I'd trust it to the fact that real community is something the collective can't fake. Their converted agents might remember loving their families, but they can't feel what it's like to watch a child from another species learn to smile again. They can't experience the joy of building something together instead of just fighting something apart. She gestured toward the expanding cavern city around them. Every person here chose to be here, chose to trust strangers with their lives and their children's futures. That choice, that active decision to build instead of just survive, that's something a hive mind can't understand or replicate. Over the following days, they implemented what became known as the Welcome Circle. Each new arrival participated in a 3-day integration process that combined medical screening, cultural exchange, and collaborative projects. Valterra and her fellow singers taught everyone basic resonance techniques, not just for detection, but for communication and emotional support. Dr. Ilanesh's expanded team, now including medical specialists from 6 different species, developed comprehensive health protocols that could identify biological or technological tampering. But it was the human elements that proved most effective. The shared meals where refugees taught each other to cook traditional foods from their homeworlds, the storytelling sessions where children learned that every species had heroes and monsters and happy endings, the work groups that paired individuals with different skills to tackle construction projects together. Sarah found herself spending more time in the nursery cavern than in the command center. Watching Vorthak younglings play hide and seek with human children while crystalline singer adolescents provided a living light show for their games had taught her something that no military academy had covered. Hope was contagious in ways that fear could never match. Commander, called Korth Vin from the entrance to the new manufacturing cavern. You need to see this. Sarah made her way through the bustling corridors, past workshops where Corvin metallurgists worked with human engineers to design new alloy compositions, past classrooms where children from 12 different worlds learn mathematics using Zephyrian quantum principles and symbiont organic modeling. The manufacturing cavern was impressive, a vast space filled with fabrication equipment salvaged from crashed ships and refugee vessels, powered by the geothermal taps that Thexmore's teams had installed. But what caught her attention was the project taking shape in the center of the space. A ship. Not just any ship, a design unlike anything she'd seen before. The hull incorporated Vorthak engineering principles for maximum efficiency, but with crystalline Singer resonance chambers integrated into the superstructure and Zephyrian quantum drives providing propulsion. It was maybe a quarter the size of a traditional cruiser, but the sensor arrays and communication equipment suggested capabilities far beyond its apparent displacement. We call it the Harmony-class reconnaissance vessel, explained a young human engineer named David Kim, who had arrived the week before with technical specifications for improved stealth systems. It's designed for deep infiltration and refugee extraction operations. Drakthon approached from the other side of the ship, his massive form somehow managing to move silently. The armor plating can withstand direct hits from collective energy weapons while maintaining full stealth capability. More importantly, the internal configuration can accommodate 40 individuals from any known species combination. 40 individuals, Sarah repeated. You're talking about rescue missions. We're talking about recruitment, corrected Valterra, her harmonic voice carrying new undertones of determination. There are hundreds of small groups out there, Commander. Survivors who think they're alone. Colony ships that escaped but have nowhere to go. Research stations that have been hiding in the outer systems for months. Sarah walked around the ship, running her hands along the unusual hull plating. The surface was warm to the touch, living metal that the symbionts had developed, capable of self-repair and adaptation. How long until it's operational? 6 weeks for basic functionality, said Thexmore. Another month for full systems integration and crew training. Crew training, David grinned. Multi-species crews, Commander. Each ship will have representatives from at least 5 different civilizations. The communication advantages alone make them worth the complexity, but the real benefit is psychological. Every rescue operation becomes a demonstration that cooperation works better than conquest. Sarah thought about the tactical implications. Fast, stealthy ships crewed by diverse teams could extract refugees from all over collective territory. But more than that, they could deliver a message. You're not alone. There's hope. There's a place where different peoples build instead of just survive. What about weapons? She asked. Drakthon's mandibles clicked, and what she'd learned was grim satisfaction. We have been analyzing captured collective technology. Their biomechanical systems have a weakness. They cannot adapt to truly unexpected inputs. A weapon system designed by multiple species working in coordination produces attack patterns that their hive mind cannot predict or counter. He gestured to weapon mounts along the ship's hull. Kinetic accelerators using Corvin targeting systems, energy projectors based on crystalline Singer harmonic principles, and quantum disruptors derived from Zephyrian physics. Individually, each system is relatively weak. Together, they create a tactical synergy that no single species could achieve. Sarah nodded slowly. And if one of these ships encounters a full collective battle group, then it runs, said Velterra simply. This is not about winning battles, Commander. This is about winning the war by changing what the war is about. That evening, Sarah stood on the observation platform overlooking the main cavern. 327 individuals from 19 different species now called New Dawn home. Children played in corridors that had been solid rock 4 months ago. Adults worked on projects that combined technologies no single civilization had ever imagined. And somewhere in the depths of the mountain, the first of many ships that would carry their message of hope across the galaxy was taking shape. Her personal communicator chimed with an incoming message from Dr. Ilanesh. Commander, we've completed the analysis of the latest refugee group. All clear, no signs of collective conversion. But I want to show you something interesting. Sarah made her way to the medical complex, where she found the doctor examining brain scans from several species. What am I looking at? Neural adaptation patterns, Dr. Ilanesh explained, her tendrils highlighting specific areas on the displays. When individuals from different species work closely together for extended periods, their brains begin to develop new neural pathways. Not just language acquisition, actual structural changes that improve cross-species empathy and communication. You're saying that living here is physically changing how people think. More than that, I'm saying it's changing how they feel. The children especially. They're developing neural architectures that no single species has ever possessed. They're becoming something new. Sarah studied the scans, seeing patterns that looked almost like the resonant structures in crystalline Singer physiology, but in human and Vorthack and Corvin brains. Is it safe? More than safe. It's evolution, Commander. Not biological evolution, social evolution. These children are going to grow up understanding cooperation in ways that no previous generation has ever experienced. They'll be able to communicate with and understand other species at levels that will seem almost telepathic to the rest of us. Sarah thought about the collective's hive mind, billions of individuals converted into a single consciousness through technological force. And here, in a hidden cavern beneath a bombed-out mining world, children from dozens of different worlds were choosing to think together through love instead of compulsion. Doctor, she said quietly, I think we just figured out how to win this war. As she made her way back to her quarters, a simple chamber carved from stone, but decorated with artwork from 17 different worlds, Sarah realized that the promise she'd made in that first desperate hour had already come true. She had built them a home, and they had given her a family unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. Tomorrow, the first Harmony-class ship would begin initial flight tests. Within weeks, it would carry their message of hope to other survivors. And someday, when the collective looked up from their endless hunger for conquest, they would find themselves facing something they could never understand or defeat, a family that had chosen to grow stronger through differences instead of eliminating them. The war for the galaxy's soul was entering its next phase, and the children playing in the corridors of New Dawn were going to be the ones who finished it. 8 months after the first promise, the galaxy had begun to whisper. The whispers traveled through quantum resonance networks that the collective couldn't detect, carried by crystalline singer harmonics across impossible distances, spreading through refugee camps and hidden colonies and desperate resistance cells with a simple message. New dawn rises. There is hope. You are not alone. Sarah stood in the command center that had been carved from the mountain's heart, watching as holographic displays showed the fruits of those whispers. 43 different locations across 7 sectors now flew the banner of New Dawn. Not just refugee camps, but thriving communities that had transformed from mere survival into something approaching civilization. Captain Chun, called Navigation Specialist Korthal, a young Zephyrian whose 4 arms moved across control surfaces with impossible precision. The Harmony 7 is reporting successful extraction from the Bellic system. 92 individuals recovered, including a complete healer's circle of the symphonic unity. Sarah, she had accepted the promotion to captain when New Dawn's population passed 1,000, nodded as she processed the implications. The symphonic unity had been renowned across 3 sectors for their bioharmonic healing techniques. If an entire healer's circle had survived the collective's assault on their homeworld, their knowledge could revolutionize medical care for refugee populations. What's their estimated arrival time? 16 hours. But, Captain, they're reporting unusual readings from their rescue site. The collective forces that hit Bellic weren't conducting standard harvesting operations. They were searching for something specific. Sarah's combat instincts, honed through 2 years of retreating battles, immediately went on alert. Searching for what? Unknown. But the pattern matches intelligence reports from the Corvin fleet remnants in the outer spiral. Whatever the collective is looking for, they're prioritizing it over standard resource acquisition. The main display shifted to show a tactical overview of known collective movements. For the first time since their expansion began, there were gaps in their advance, areas where they bypassed resource-rich systems in favor of seemingly random targets. Dr. Ilanesh to Command Center came the symbiont's voice over the communication system. Captain, please report to Medical Complex 7 immediately. We have a situation that requires your attention. Sarah made her way through corridors that bore little resemblance to the rough caves they'd started with. The walls now featured murals painted by refugee children, scenes of homeworlds lost and futures hoped for, rendered in artistic styles that blended traditions from dozens of different civilizations. Bioluminescent gardens provided both nutrition and beauty, while workshops filled with the sounds of construction, learning, and life created a backdrop of purposeful activity. Medical Complex 7 was one of the newer facilities, built specifically to handle the unique physiology of the transcendent collective refugees, beings who existed partially in what they called the deep space between thoughts. Sarah found Dr. Ilanesh tending to a patient unlike any she'd seen before. A creature that seemed to exist in multiple dimensions simultaneously, its form shifting between states that human eyes couldn't quite process. Captain, Dr. Ilanesh said without looking up from her work, meet Thoughtkeeper Zaxandra of the Transcendent Collective. She arrived aboard the Harmony 7 with information that changes our understanding of the war. Sarah approached carefully. The Transcendent Collective was legendary even among the exotic species of the galaxy's outer rim. Beings who had evolved beyond purely physical existence and were said to commune directly with the fundamental forces of space-time. Greetings, builder of new things, came a voice that seemed to originate from inside Sarah's head rather than from any physical source. I bring knowledge of the Great Hunger's true purpose. The Great Hunger? Your translation systems call it the Kethmoran Collective, but it is not what your people believe. It does not seek resources or territory or even the continuation of its own existence. Sarah felt a chill that had nothing to do with the medical complex's temperature control. What does it seek? The shifting form seemed to stabilize slightly, taking on aspects that resembled a cross between a nebula and a flowering plant. It seeks the song. I don't understand. The first song, the harmonic frequency that initiated what you call the Big Bang. The original vibration from which all matter, energy, consciousness, and possibility emerged. The collective believes that if it can gather enough computational power, enough harvested minds, it can reverse engineer the song and remake reality according to its own design. Dr. Ilanesh's tendrils went rigid with shock. That would require the processing power of every conscious mind in the galaxy. Precisely. The collective does not seek to rule the galaxy. It seeks to become the galaxy, to replace the chaotic, inefficient reality that allows for individual consciousness with a perfectly ordered universe where all things serve the hive mind's design. Sarah sat down heavily in the nearest chair. Every mind in the galaxy, every person, every child, every possibility for difference, creativity, love, or hope, Zhuoyexandra confirmed. Your human understanding of entropy suggests that chaos leads to decay. But the transcendent collective knows better. Chaos leads to beauty. The random interactions between incompatible systems produce art, music, literature, family, and every other thing that makes existence worthwhile. The implications hit Sarah like a physical blow. All of their efforts, the rescued refugees, the hidden communities, the ships full of hope carrying their message across the stars, they weren't just fighting for survival. They were fighting for the right of the universe to be imperfect, chaotic, and wonderful. How long, she asked. The calculations are imprecise, but our observations suggest that the collective has acquired perhaps 60% of the processing power it requires. At current expansion rates, they will achieve critical mass within 18 standard months. 18 months. Sarah thought about the children playing in New Dawn's corridors, the young Vorthack engineers working alongside human teenagers to design impossible technologies, the crystalline singers teaching harmonic theory to anyone willing to learn. 18 months to save not just their lives, but their right to exist as individuals in a universe that celebrated difference instead of demanding conformity. There has to be a way to stop them, she said. Zhuoyexandra's form shifted through patterns that suggested deep thought. Perhaps. The Transcendent Collective has been researching counterharmonics, frequencies that could disrupt the first song calculation. But such research requires the cooperation of many different types of consciousness working in harmony. Different types of consciousness. Sarah stood up suddenly. The neural adaptation patterns that Dr. Ilanesh discovered. The children here aren't just learning to communicate across species. They're developing new forms of consciousness entirely. Precisely. Your New Dawn communities have become laboratories for consciousness evolution. The young ones especially are developing mental architectures that bridge multiple species' neural patterns. They think in ways that no single species could achieve alone. Dr. Ilanesh extended several tendrils toward her latest brain scan data. Captain, I've been monitoring the development patterns. The children who have lived here longest show neural complexity that exceeds anything in our databases. They're not just cooperating, they're becoming something new. Sarah began pacing, her mind racing through possibilities. If we could expand this effect, create more communities like New Dawn, get more children and adults working together across species lines, you could develop enough consciousness diversity to calculate the counterharmonic. Zhuoyexandra finished. But the timeline would be challenging. Such mental evolution requires time, safety, and the kind of deep trust that your people call love. Then, we need to buy that time. Sarah activated her personal communicator. All senior staff to the main conference chamber immediately. We're about to change the scope of this war. Within an hour, the conference chamber, another space that had been carved from solid rock but now featured adaptive lighting and acoustic systems designed by half a dozen different species, filled with the leadership of New Dawn. Fexmore represented the Vorthack Engineering Consortium. Velterra spoke for the Crystalline Singer Harmony. War Prime Drakthon commanded the Corvin military refugees. Dr. Ilanesh headed medical operations, and dozens of others representing every species and specialty group in their growing community. Sarah stood at the center of the gathering, looking at faces that had become as familiar as family over the past months. We've learned why the collective is expanding so aggressively, and it's worse than we thought. She shared Zexandra's revelation, watching as expressions of shock and determination rippled across species lines. When she finished, the chamber fell silent except for the soft harmonics that crystalline singers use for contemplation. So, said Thexmore finally, we are not fighting for our right to exist. We are fighting for the right of existence itself to continue in its current form. That's correct. But we also have something the collective doesn't expect. Our children, all of our children, regardless of species, are developing into something that might be able to calculate the counterharmonic to stop them. Drakthon's mandibles clicked in thoughtful analysis. This requires a change in strategy. Instead of simply rescuing refugees, we must actively work to create more communities like New Dawn. Not just create them, added Valterra. We must teach them to succeed independently. The consciousness evolution that Dr. Ilanesh has documented requires specific social conditions, safety, cooperation, exposure to multiple species during developmental periods. David Kim, now head of ship design and construction, leaned forward. We'll need a lot more ships. Not just the Harmony-class reconnaissance vessels, but colony ships, mobile hospitals, educational facilities. Entire fleets dedicated to spreading the New Dawn model. How long to develop the production capacity? Sarah asked. Thexmore's forearms moved in rapid calculations. With our current resources and the new techniques we've developed, 6 months to establish basic shipyard facilities. Another year to reach full production capacity. We don't have a year, Sarah said. We have maybe 18 months total, and we need to achieve consciousness evolution that normally takes generations. Dr. Ilanesh had been quietly reviewing data throughout the meeting. Captain, there might be a way to accelerate the process. The neural adaptation patterns we've observed suggest that consciousness evolution happens faster when individuals are exposed to crisis situations that require unprecedented cooperation. You're suggesting we put children in danger? No, I'm suggesting we put them in charge of solving problems that adults from single species can't handle. Give them challenges that require the kind of multi-species thinking they're developing. Maria Santos, who had become head of education and child development, nodded enthusiastically. We've already seen this happening naturally. The mixed species work groups consistently outperform single-species teams on complex tasks. The children especially seem to approach problems from angles that surprise everyone. So we create a galaxy-wide network of communities, Sarah said slowly, each one functioning as a laboratory for consciousness evolution. We give them challenges that require unprecedented cooperation. And we protect them long enough for the children to grow into something that can calculate how to save reality itself. Zoe Alexandra's shifting form had been quietly observing from a corner of the chamber. The Transcendent Collective would be honored to assist. Our people can provide guidance on the theoretical aspects of counterharmonic calculation. And our dimensional abilities allow for communication networks that the Keth Moran cannot detect or disrupt. Over the following weeks, New Dawn transformed from a hidden refuge into the command center for the most ambitious undertaking in galactic history. Production facilities worked around the clock to build ships designed not for war, but for hope. Mobile cities that could establish self-sufficient communities and systems the collective hadn't yet reached. The first of these Hope-class colony ships launched on a mission to the Kepler Remnant, where intelligence suggested nearly 1,000 refugees from the academic worlds have been hiding in the ruins of a research facility. The ship carried not just supplies and protection, but teachers, engineers, and, most importantly, children who had grown up in New Dawn's unique environment and could serve as catalysts for consciousness evolution in new communities. Sarah stood in the observation deck as the massive ship engaged its quantum drives, carrying 50 families from a dozen different species toward an uncertain future. But for the first time since this war began, uncertainty felt like hope instead of dread. Captain, said Valterra from beside her, the children have asked to speak with you. Sarah found them gathered in one of the educational spaces, 37 young beings from 15 different species, ranging in age from the equivalent of human 8-year-olds to adolescents. What struck her wasn't their diversity, but their unity. They moved and spoke as if they were part of a single, distributed consciousness while still maintaining their individual personalities. We've been talking, said Lin Chun, a human girl whose neural scans showed integration patterns that resembled crystalline Singer harmonics, about the counterharmonic calculation, about what we need to do. And Sarah asked gently. We think we can do it, said Vorthka. one of the young Vorthak whose mandibles have been modified with resonance chambers that allowed him to participate in crystalline singer-harmonic communications. But not from here, not from one place. A Zephyrian adolescent named Quintel gestured with all four arms toward a holographic display that showed the expanding network of New Dawn communities. The calculation is too big for any single group. It has to be distributed across many communities, with each group handling part of the problem. Like a song that's too complex for one voice, added Sylphina, a young crystalline singer whose bioluminescence had adapted to include patterns that other species could understand intuitively. But beautiful when everyone sings together. Sarah knelt down to their level, looking into eyes that belonged to different species, but shared the same impossible depth of understanding. Are you telling me you want to leave New Dawn? Spread out across the galaxy to help other communities develop the same consciousness integration you've achieved? Not leave, Lynn said. Grow. New Dawn isn't just this mountain anymore, Captain. New Dawn is everywhere people choose to build instead of just survive. Sarah felt tears she hadn't even realized were forming. These children, her children, regardless of species, were volunteering to scatter across a war-torn galaxy to plant seeds of hope in communities they'd never seen, among people they'd never met. It's dangerous, she said. The collective is still expanding. We can't guarantee your safety. Vorthka's mandibles shifted into what she'd learned was an expression of gentle amusement. Captain, you promised to build us a home, and we promised to give you a family. This is what families do. They grow big enough to include everyone who needs them. That night, Sarah sat in her quarters writing what might be the most important report in human history. Not a military assessment or a tactical analysis, but a letter to the future, a record of the day when children from across the galaxy chose to shoulder the responsibility for saving reality itself. Personal log, Captain Sarah Chun, New Dawn Central. Date 2388.067. Today, 37 children volunteered to carry our hope to the stars. They understand the cost, and they understand the stakes. More importantly, they understand something that no military academy ever taught me, that the strongest defense against those who would force unity through conquest is the willing choice to create unity through love. She paused, looking out through her window at the cavern city that had grown from desperation and 47 refugees into something that was reshaping the galaxy's understanding of what civilization could be. Tomorrow, we begin distributing the future across 1,000 worlds. And if we succeed, the children playing in these corridors tonight will grow up in a universe that chooses chaos over control, love over logic, and hope over certainty. The collective wants to sing the universe into perfect order. But our children are going to teach the galaxy how to sing harmony instead. The war for reality's soul had entered its final phase. And the weapon that would win, it wasn't made of metal or energy, but of trust, cooperation, and the radical choice to see difference as strength rather than weakness. 1 year, and for months after the promise, the galaxy was singing, not with one voice, but with thousands, each New Dawn community adding its unique harmony to a growing symphony of consciousness that spanned star systems and transcended species barriers. What had begun as desperate refugees hiding in mountain caves had evolved into a network of 47 thriving worlds where children of different species played together while their parents worked to reshape the fundamental nature of civilization. Admiral Sarah Chun, the promotion had come with command of the New Dawn Expeditionary Fleet, stood in the bridge of the flagship Harmony's Promise, watching as her tactical displays showed something unprecedented in galactic history. Organized resistance to the Keth-Moran collective that was actually succeeding. Admiral, called Commander Vorthka from the communications station. The young Vorthak had grown during his time spreading the New Dawn philosophy to refugee communities across the outer spiral, but his enthusiasm remained infectious. We're receiving harmonic reports from the Kepo network. The consciousness integration experiment has reached critical phase. Sarah moved to stand beside him at the display that showed brain scan data from children across 17 different worlds. The neural patterns were unlike anything in any database. Complex weaves of thought that incorporated processing methods from dozens of different species while maintaining the unique perspectives that made each individual special. Dr. Ilanesh, what's your assessment? The symbiont doctor, whose tendrils now showed the silver streaks that marked a respected elder, extended several sensory organs toward the data streams. The development exceeds our most optimistic projections, Admiral. These young minds have achieved consciousness architectures that allow them to think cooperatively across interstellar distances while maintaining individual creativity and emotional depth. In other words, they're ready to attempt the counterharmonic calculation. Sarah felt her breath catch. After months of building communities, rescuing refugees, and nurturing the impossible cooperation that had become their trademark, they had finally reached the moment when everything would be decided. Time frame for the attempt. The children have requested 72 hours to coordinate across all network communities. They want every participating mind to be properly synchronized before beginning the calculation. Sarah nodded, but her attention was drawn to another display showing collective fleet movements. The enemy hadn't been idle during New Dawn's expansion. Their forces had consolidated into 3 massive armadas, each containing enough harvested minds to strip entire sectors bare of consciousness. And, according to intelligence from the Transcendent Collective's dimensional monitoring, all 3 fleets were converging on a single target. The Galactic Core region, where the original first song calculations suggested the universe's fundamental harmonics were most accessible. War Prime Drakthon. She called to the massive Corvin who served as her tactical advisor. How long until the collective armadas reach their target? 68 standard hours, Drakthon replied, his translated voice carrying grim certainty. Once they achieve optimal positioning, their combined computational power will be sufficient to begin the reality restructuring process. So we have a 4-hour window between when our children finish their calculation and when the collective begins theirs. Assuming our calculation works, added Thoughtkeeper Zawaxandra from her dimensional monitoring station. The counterharmonic theory is sound, but it has never been tested on this scale. Sarah looked around the bridge at faces that had become family over the past year. Beings from a dozen different worlds who had chosen to trust each other with the fate of reality itself. Then, we'd better make sure it works. The next 72 hours passed in a blur of preparation and anticipation. Across the network, communities that had grown from refugee camps into thriving cities prepared for the most important moment in galactic history. Children who had spent months learning to think cooperatively across species barriers now faced the ultimate test of their evolved consciousness. Sarah found herself spending more time in the ship's observation lounge than on the bridge, watching as quantum communication networks carried harmonic patterns between worlds. The crystalline singers had developed techniques that allowed real-time consciousness sharing across impossible distances, creating a distributed mind that encompassed thousands of individuals while preserving each one's unique perspective. "It's beautiful," said Maria Santos, who had become one of New Dawn's most effective community coordinators. She stood beside Sarah, watching as the harmonic displays showed patterns of unprecedented complexity flowing between worlds. "Look at how they're thinking together." The display showed neural activity that resembled music more than traditional brain patterns, flowing melodies where human analytical thinking harmonized with Vorthack engineering precision. Crystalline Singer emotional resonance provided rhythm for Zephyrian quantum calculations, and dozens of other species contributed their unique cognitive abilities to create something greater than the sum of its parts. "Admiral," came Velterra's harmonic voice over the communication system. "The children are ready to begin the final calculation phase." Sarah made her way to the bridge, where every screen now showed the same thing. Young beings from across the network, their faces calm with concentration as they prepared to attempt something that had never been tried before. Lin Shun, now 14, and serving as one of the primary human coordinators, looked directly into the camera from her station on New Dawn Prime. "We're ready, Admiral. All network communities are synchronized and prepared for harmonic convergence." "The collective fleets?" Sarah asked. 36 hours from optimal positioning, Drakthon reported. "But, Admiral, we're detecting unusual activity in their forward elements. They appear to be attempting some form of preliminary calculation. They're testing their theories," Zawaxandra confirmed. "Small-scale reality modifications in uninhabited systems. The results are disturbing." The main display shifted to show feeds from the affected systems. Where once there had been planets with unique geological features, diverse ecosystems, and the random beauty that came from billions of years of chaotic development. There were now perfect spheres of uniform composition orbiting in precisely calculated patterns. They're turning reality into a spreadsheet, Sarah breathed. Beginning counterharmonic calculation now, Lynn announced. What happened next defied description in any single language. The harmonic displays exploded into patterns of impossible complexity as thousands of young minds began working together to solve the greatest puzzle in the universe's history. Human creativity sparked against Vorthack precision. Crystalline Singer emotion harmonized with Zephyrian logic, and species that had never met in person collaborated across the quantum foam to calculate frequencies that could preserve the beautiful chaos of natural reality. For 6 hours, Sarah watched as the network children performed the most complex mental operation in galactic history. Their combined consciousness moved through mathematical spaces that no single species could navigate alone, exploring harmonic possibilities that require the unique perspectives of dozens of different evolutionary paths. Partial solution emerging, reported Dr. Ilanesh from her monitoring station. The pattern is unlike anything in our theoretical models, but it's mathematically coherent. More than coherent, Zweitzender added, her dimensional sense is providing analysis that purely physical beings couldn't achieve. It's beautiful. The counterharmonic doesn't just disrupt the collective's reality restructuring. It enhances the natural chaos that makes the universe capable of producing art, love, and hope. But as the calculation progressed, new alarms began sounding throughout the ship. The collective armadas had accelerated their approach, somehow detecting that their plans were being challenged. Admiral, called Commander Kim from the sensor station. Collective forces are moving to attack formation. They're targeting our communication nodes. Sarah realized the enemy's strategy immediately. If they could disrupt the network's ability to maintain consciousness coordination, the counterharmonic calculation would collapse. All defensive fleets to intercept positions. Priority protection for communication relay stations. The next 12 hours became the strangest battle in military history. While children across 47 worlds continued their reality-saving calculation, fleets of ships designed for cooperation rather than conquest engaged collective forces in battles that were less about destroying enemies than about maintaining the communication networks that allowed young minds to think together across interstellar distances. Harmony 7 reporting successful protection of the Kepler relay, came one report. Nova Dawn forces have successfully repelled attack on the outer spiral hub, came another. But the collective's assault was relentless. For every communication node they protected, 2 more came under attack. For every battle won, 3 more began. Admiral, Vorthka called from his station. The children report calculation is 93% complete, but we're losing network coherence. Too many communication disruptions. Sarah looked at the tactical display, showing her forces spread across 7 sectors, fighting desperately to maintain connections between communities that were moments away from solving the universe's greatest puzzle. But the collective's numbers were overwhelming, and their willingness to sacrifice harvested minds for tactical advantage was something no cooperative society could match. Time until collective forces reach optimal position for their reality restructuring. 14 hours, Dracthon reported, and time for our calculation to complete at current efficiency. 16 hours, Dr. Ilanesh said quietly. 2 hours short. After everything they had built, everything they had sacrificed, they were going to fail by 2 hours. Sarah closed her eyes and thought about the promise she had made in a desperate cave, what felt like a lifetime ago. I'll build you a home, and you'll give me a family. She had kept her word. They had all kept their words. The network represented the greatest family in galactic history, binding together not through conquest or conversion, but through the simple choice to care for each other. But families didn't just support each other in good times. They made sacrifices for each other when everything was on the line. Admiral, Lynn's voice came across the communication network, somehow maintaining perfect calm despite the chaos erupting around her world. We found a way to complete the calculation in time. Ow! By adding your minds to ours. Sarah felt her breath catch. Lynn, we don't have the neural architecture modifications. We can't participate in consciousness coordination at the level you've achieved. You don't need modifications, Admiral. You need trust. The calculation requires one final component, the harmonic frequency of willing sacrifice for family. And that's something every adult in the network understands better than any child. The implications hit Sarah immediately. The counterharmonic calculation wasn't just a mathematical equation. It was a demonstration of the fundamental principle that made reality worth preserving. The willingness to risk everything for those you love, not because you have to, but because you choose to. All network adults, Sarah announced across the fleet communication system. Prepare for consciousness integration with the calculation matrix. Admiral, Dr. Ilan Esh called urgently. The neurological stress could be fatal for individuals who haven't undergone gradual adaptation. Then, we'd better make sure this works on the first try, Sarah replied. What followed was the most beautiful and terrifying experience of Sarah's life. As the network children guided them through the consciousness integration process, she felt her individual mind expand to encompass perspectives from across the galaxy. She experienced the universe through Vortex engineering precision, felt emotions with crystalline Singer harmonic depth, understood quantum mechanics through Zephyrian mathematical intuition. But more than that, she felt the love. Thousands of adults across dozens of worlds, each one willing to risk their minds for the children who had become their hope for the future. Parents who had lost everything choosing to trust strangers with their children's safety. Warriors laying down weapons to build gardens instead. Teachers learning to think in ways their species had never imagined. The counterharmonic calculation completed in a moment that seemed to last forever and no time at all. Sarah felt the solution flow through the network consciousness like a song that had always existed but never been sung. Frequencies that would preserve the chaotic beauty of natural reality while disrupting the collective's attempt to impose artificial order. Calculation complete, Lynn announced, her young voice somehow carrying the authority of thousands of minds working in harmony. Broadcasting counterharmonic on all dimensional frequencies. Across the galaxy, the network communities released their solution into the quantum foam that underlay reality itself. The harmonic frequencies spread faster than light, carried by the same fundamental forces that the collective had sought to control. On the main display, Sarah watched as the first collective fleet reached optimal position and began their reality restructuring attempt. For a moment, the stars themselves seemed to flicker as two incompatible visions of existence clashed at the most fundamental level. Then, the counterharmonic reached them. The perfectly ordered spheres that the collective had created began to crack and fracture, returning to the beautiful chaos of natural formation. The biomechanical soldiers that moved in perfect coordination suddenly stumbled as their hive-mind connection faltered. And across three armadas containing billions of harvested minds, something unprecedented began to happen. Individual consciousness started reasserting itself. Admiral, Alexandra called from her monitoring station. The counterharmonic isn't just disrupting their calculations. It's reversing their conversion process. The harvested minds are remembering who they were. Sarah watched in amazement as collective ships began breaking formation, their crews rediscovering the capacity for independent thought and choice. Some turned and fled, seeking to escape the horror of what they had been forced to participate in. Others simply stopped, their crews overwhelmed by the return of emotions and memories that had been suppressed for months or years. But the most beautiful sight was on the communication displays showing network worlds. Children who had risked their minds to save reality now stood together in celebration, their faces showing not just relief, but joy. They had not only preserved the universe's right to exist in chaotic beauty, they had demonstrated that cooperation was stronger than conquest, love more powerful than control. Personal log, Admiral Sarah Chun. Network flagship Harmony's Promise. Date 2388.243. Today, children from across the galaxy taught the universe how to sing its own song. The Keth Moran Collective sought to replace reality with their vision of perfect order. Instead, they discovered that chaos guided by love produces harmonies no single mind could imagine. She paused, looking out at stars that would continue to burn in random beauty rather than artificial precision. The war is over. But the real work, building a civilization that chooses cooperation over conquest, that work is just beginning. And for the first time since this all started, I'm not worried about our chances. Because we have something that no hive mind can understand or replicate. We have family. And family means that no one faces the future alone. The counterharmonic continued to spread across the galaxy, carrying with it not just the mathematical solution to preserve reality's chaotic beauty, but the promise that differences would always be celebrated rather than eliminated. The network had kept Sarah's original promise. They had built homes for everyone who needed them, and created the greatest family the galaxy had ever known. And in the corridors of 47 worlds, children who had saved reality itself continued to play together, their laughter proving that sometimes the most powerful weapon against those who would force uniformity is the simple choice to embrace wonderful, chaotic, beautiful difference. 5 years after the promise, the galaxy was learning to be a family. Sarah stood in the Grand Assembly Hall of New Dawn Prime, watching as representatives from over 300 worlds gathered for the 5th anniversary celebration of what historians would remember as Liberation Day. The moment when the counterharmonic freed billions of minds from collective control and restored the universe's right to exist in beautiful chaos. The hall itself exemplified everything the network had achieved. Built into the heart of a mountain that had once sheltered desperate refugees, it now soared through multiple levels carved with artistic techniques that blended traditions from dozens of worlds. Bioluminescent gardens created by symbiont cultivation methods provided living light, while crystalline Singer resonance chambers ensured perfect acoustics for speakers representing species with vastly different communication needs. Admiral Chun called a familiar voice. Sarah turned to see Lin Chun approaching. No longer the 14-year-old who had helped coordinate the reality-saving calculation, but a young woman whose neural integration patterns had become the template for consciousness evolution programs across the network. The memorial circle is ready for your address. Sarah nodded, though her attention was momentarily caught by the sight of Lin's companion, a young Vorthak male whose mandibles had been modified with harmonic resonators, allowing him to participate fully in cross-species consciousness integration. Not unusual in itself. Such modifications had become common among network youth, but what struck her was the casual intimacy between them. Romance between species had once been considered impossible due to biological incompatibility, but network communities had discovered that emotional connection transcended physical form. They made their way through corridors filled with artwork created by children whose minds spanned multiple species' cognitive architectures. The pieces were unlike anything that had existed before the war. Sculptures that existed partially in normal space and partially in quantum dimensions, paintings that changed meaning based on the viewer's species, musical compositions that incorporated harmonic frequencies that could only be appreciated by minds trained in cross-species consciousness integration. The memorial circle was perhaps the most sacred space in New Dawn Prime, a vast circular chamber where the names of every being lost to the collective were carved into walls that spiraled up into darkness. Bioluminescent markers indicated not just individual names, but relationships, family connections, friendships, mentorships, and loves that had been severed by the war. As Sarah entered, she saw representatives from every member world of the network gathered in respectful silence. War Prime Drakthon stood beside Dr. Elon Esh, the massive Corvin's presence somehow managing to convey both strength and gentleness. Velterra's crystalline form flickered with patterns of remembrance and hope. Commander Vorthka had brought his own family, a mixed-species household that included adopted children from 6 different worlds. But it was the sight of Thoughtkeeper Zexandra that made Sarah's breath catch. The transcendent collective being had undergone a transformation during the years since Liberation Day. Her multidimensional form now incorporating harmonic elements that allowed her to exist partially in normal space-time while maintaining her connection to the deep space between thoughts. She served as the network's primary liaison to the recovered collective minds, helping billions of beings readjust to individual consciousness after years of hive mind integration. Friends, Sarah began, her voice carrying easily through the resonance chambers to every corner of the memorial circle. We gather today not just to remember those we lost, but to celebrate what they died to protect, the right of every consciousness to choose its own path through the chaos of existence. She paused, looking at faces that represented dozens of species, but somehow expressed the same fundamental emotion: hope tempered by memory, joy earned through suffering. 5 years ago, 47 refugees made a promise in a cave beneath a burning world. We promised to build homes for everyone who needed them, and to create families that chose love over convenience, cooperation over conquest. Today, the network encompasses over 300 worlds where children of different species play together while their parents work to ensure that never again will anyone face the choice between individual consciousness and survival. The formal address continued for another hour, covering the network's achievements and ongoing challenges. The creation of the consciousness preservation protocols that ensured no being could be forced into hive mind integration. The establishment of integration academies where children and adults could learn to think cooperatively across species barriers while maintaining their individual identities. The development of new technologies that combine the engineering principles of dozens of different civilizations to create solutions no single species could have imagined. But it was the informal gathering afterward that truly demonstrated how far they had come. Sarah found herself in conversation with Captain Elena Vasquez of the reformed Earth Defense Fleet, one of thousands of humans who had been liberated from collective control and chosen to join the network rather than return to their devastated homeworlds. "Admiral, I wanted to thank you personally. When the counterharmonic freed me from the hive mind, I expected to find Earth rebuilt and ready to reclaim its position in galactic politics. Instead, I found something better: a civilization that measures success not by how much territory you control, but by how many different ways of thinking you can support." "It wasn't my idea," Sarah replied. "It was theirs." She gestured toward a group of young beings engaged in animated discussion near one of the memorial walls. Lin Shun was explaining something to a mixed group that included recently integrated collective refugees, using visual displays that shifted between mathematical equations, artistic representations, and what appeared to be living sculptures that changed form as she spoke. "The next generation?" Captain Vasquez asked. "The current generation. They're already taking over most of the complex thinking work. Their minds can process information in ways that single-species consciousness can't match, but they've retained the emotional depth and creativity that made individual thought worth preserving in the first place." As if summoned by their conversation, Lynn approached with her characteristic smile, an expression that somehow conveyed both human warmth and the harmonic contentment that she'd learned from crystalline singer integration. "Admiral, we've been discussing the Outer Rim expansion project. The recovered collective populations in the frontier systems are requesting network assistance in establishing integrated communities." "How many beings are we talking about?" "Approximately 40 billion individuals across 63 systems. Most of them are still adjusting to individual consciousness after years of hive mind integration. They need guidance on everything from basic decision-making skills to forming personal relationships." Sarah felt the familiar weight of responsibility that came with network leadership. 40 billion minds who had been reduced to computational resources for an alien intelligence, now struggling to remember what it meant to be individuals. "Do we have the resources?" "We have something better," Lynn replied. "We have people who understand." Every network community includes collective refugees who have successfully made the transition. They're volunteering to lead integration teams to help the new populations. Integration teams? Mixed groups, former collective drones working with network children and adults to create new communities from scratch. The psychological healing happens faster when people can see that others have survived similar trauma and built meaningful lives. Dr. Ilanesh approached from across the chamber, her tendrils swaying with the contentment that marked successful medical work. "Admiral, the latest psychological assessments from the recovered populations show remarkable progress. The combination of network integration techniques and peer counseling from other collective survivors has reduced adaptation trauma by over 70% compared to our initial projections. And the children born in post-liberation communities? Extraordinary. They show no signs of the consciousness fragmentation that we initially feared. Instead, they're developing integration patterns that exceed even our most optimistic models. We estimate that within a generation, the distinction between original consciousness and recovered consciousness will be meaningless." Sarah looked around the memorial circle at the gathering that had naturally sorted itself into mixed groups, former enemies sharing stories, children teaching adults new ways of thinking, beings from dozens of worlds working together on projects that none of them could have imagined alone. Dr. Ilanesh, when we started this, did you ever imagine it would grow into something like this? The symbiont's tendrils shifted into patterns that Sarah had learned meant profound contentment. Admiral, my species has studied social evolution for millennia. We understand the mathematics of cooperation, the biology of #hook, the last human promise in the dying light of 1,000 burning worlds, when the great galactic empires crumbled like sandcastles before an unstoppable tide of mechanical death. Humanity made its final stand not with weapons of mass destruction, but with something far more dangerous: hope. The Kethmoran Collective had swept across 3 spiral arms in their relentless harvest of organic life, their biomechanical armies converting entire civilizations into raw materials for their ever-expanding hive mind. Planets that had stood for millions of years were stripped bare in mere days, their inhabitants processed into neural paste to feed the Collective's hunger for consciousness. But on the remote mining world of Keltharus 7, something unprecedented happened. A single human warrior, battered and bleeding from 100 battles, stood before the last survivors of 17 different species, refugees who had nowhere left to run. Children of the proud Vorthak Empire clutched broken toys. Elderly Zephyrian philosophers wept for their lost libraries. Young crystalline singers hummed funeral dirges for worlds that would never sing again. Commander Sarek Chun, last of the 3rd Human Expeditionary Force, looked into their desperate eyes and made a promise that would echo across the stars. I'll build you a home, and you'll give me a family. What she didn't know was that her words would become the foundation of something the galaxy had never seen before, a new kind of civilization built not on conquest or domination, but on the uniquely human concept of chosen family. And the Kethmoran Collective, for all their technological superiority, had never encountered an enemy who fought not just for survival, but for love. The war for the galaxy's soul was about to begin.